Fair enough. Right, obviously for the LEC, in my opinion, it's actually probably the best league in the world to watch right now. I even say that over the LPL, by the way, because the problem with the LPL is the bottom teams are dreadful, even if there are so many really good teams. So I think in the fact of like listen, I know people are going to meme on like SK and Astralis and stuff. Mate, even those teams will still steal a best of one every now and then. And I actually think now that you look at the other teams and what they made the moves, dude, this league is wide open. This looks amazing, the league actually right now. Like, obviously there's teams that have started off super hot. Maybe you don't think will end hot. There's teams that haven't started as hot that you reckon will be good by the end. So playoffs could be amazing for this one. So I want to start here. Obviously, one of the big pieces of news is we're going to lose one of the organisations from the LEC already. And amazingly, it isn't fucking XL or Astralis. It's actually a team selling in this case, not being kicked out, and it's obviously going to be Schalke. I know they go null fear, but I'm not German, so I just called Schalke, don't I? So the team, people might know, was the one that had obviously the two. I'd say like one was the Miracle Run. That was even a pretty good name for it. It was like a mad one-off run in summer last year where they obviously made the playoffs. In doing so, they helped Fnatic make the playoffs, and they had that crazy like, you know, they even started off winning. Then in the spring split, for me, that was just a legit run. They were actually just a good team at that point in time. You know, there's no miracle involved. They actually, I mean, they straight up almost did just beat G2. Like they were very impressive. So to lose this team, right? There's a million ways you can go on this angle. Obviously, people are going to think of like the team in the game. Did they like them? Are they going to think of like if they like some of the players? Obviously, the hype story of these last team splits might be one. I wanted to start on the business side of things though. So, Rich, obviously, people know your org when you were with H2K was actually one of the main sets of people who were on the vanguard of pushing for things like franchising and the idea that like you basically there has to be a change to how the ecosystems run. Otherwise, it's like an arms race between like 50 teams all just bodying each other on how much you pay. So what are your thoughts on what it actually means for the league? I know in the past episode you said basically like you're going to basically make money if you sell at the price that they've been quoted at. It was like 26.5 million euros, I believe. Obviously the buy-in on paper is 10 million. Even then, I don't think a lot of fans know this. Most of those buy-ins for leagues are not like you really give them 10 million. It's not like Scrooge McDuck. You don't give them a fucking sack of gold. Like most of that's like essentially it vests over time, you know, like you start out, maybe you pay like, I don't know, I'd say like $500,000, $1 million or something. And then the idea is over the years, you pay part of that fee. And so what do you think actually on the business side of this, like implications for like, for example, will this now maybe be a gold rush and some of the smaller orgs that haven't been good, they'll try and sell for 20, 30 million? Is it actually good that like as an org, are they one of the ones that you would have been more sad to see go or stay? Where do you want to attack this one from, Rich?
Yeah, so this is something where there are lots of different ways to look at it. It all comes down to timing, and also it's ultimately going to come down to hindsight, because the question, like basically, if you want to be in LEC, if you buy a franchise slot in LEC or indeed LCS or whatever, and you believe that by using that asset alone to garner income streams, you will most likely never be successful, right? You will most likely always be running at a deficit. The way the salaries work and they inflate, even if you become more successful, your overhead's going to be more by definition. Like that's just how it works. So if you go into LEC perpetually thinking you're going to run this company perpetually and you don't have an exit strategy, it's going to be a bad business move most likely. Now, if you bought in with the intention of selling at some point down the line, there's a very real chance that you can make a significant amount of money from doing it, right? And when it comes to Schalke, they've been forced into this corner because obviously the situation with their football team and the sort of parachute from the going down divisions, all the rest of it. So for them, it's kind of a no-brainer. They were always a team who kind of operated within their means anyway, which is neither a good thing or a bad thing. It's a fiscally sound thing to do, I guess you could say. But obviously, you know, some people don't like that. Riot don't necessarily like that. And I think from Schalke's perspective, I think obviously it makes perfect sense, right? They're going to basically triple or 3x of what they paid for it. That doesn't mean that there weren't costs on the interim, as some fans might think. Like, haha, they literally just made 3 times their money. Like, it's not quite how it works. Yeah. But in terms of like, if I was just given the keys to an LCS slot and told, like, can you sell now? Basically, the calculation I have to do in my head is how likely is it that the revenue streams and the salaries go up? Because if I'm looking to sell, salaries going up isn't actually necessarily a bad thing. Let's say that 1 million sponsors comes into the entire league this season, right? And that gets spread out evenly. And then the salaries are all adjusted to account for that, right? But they're still all losing money because obviously just the element of competition means that some people are willing to stretch and then other people are forced to stretch to reach after them. If you just increase those numbers, even if you're still at a loss, as long as the ratio of the loss is similar, so for example, now it goes to 10 million, but I'm still losing, I'm 20% at a 20% deficit, my slot is worth more simply because the numbers I'm dealing with are bigger. It's like if you deal with any company in the world, if it's $1 million company and in debt, it's worth X amount of money. If it's $1 billion company and it's the same amount of percentage-wise, the same amount of debt, it's worth astronomically more, right? So I would be trying to basically pick my moment where I think this is going to be at its peak. And that's scary, right? That's unknown. There's no guarantees on that. But if I had to guess, I would say it's probably not at its peak right now. I think there's a very high likelihood that in a couple of years' time, imagine a G2 or someone, we saw one of the deals that TSM did, right? Imagine this becomes more of a staple or more commonplace, and teams in general push the income numbers up and they also push the salary numbers up. Even if I'm barely holding on, right? Like I'm not getting most of this money, I'm getting some of it, and I'm not paying my players as much, it doesn't matter because they're buying the slot, they're not buying your situation. So I'd be trying to put myself in a position where instead of selling for 30 million, maybe I can sell for 60 million in 2 years, and I don't think that's far-fetched. So for all of the stuff I've said about LEC not being a viable business plan in the past, whatever, I absolutely stand by that. I think 90% of what I said was completely correct and justified and even vindicated, but that is working on the assumption that you're in it for the long haul, that basically this is your baby and you have no intention of selling. And in my opinion, if you do that, you're going to have a very small likelihood of ever making a return on it. If your goal was always to sell, there are definitely ways you can do that. And as for Schalke's position, I mean, it wasn't even really a choice, right? They just kind of had to find the best buyer and get the best value that they could. And for the situation as it is now, considering they're basically backs are against the wall, I think it's good business overall by them, I would say.
Okay. What do you think, Wicked? Obviously, take any angle you want on this.
So I think more from the community perspective, I think Schalke was a good team to have because they did make content, they did try, they didn't just go in and give up, like they even failed the first time around or they got kicked out. But I don't think they were exceptional either. I want to see teams do much more for the community in terms of content. Like I've recently seen Astralis actually starting to put out content. And I think it's really important because it grows the entire business all around for everyone. And it's the same with LEC. LEC is doing amazing content now. And I felt like Schalke could have done more, so I'm not necessarily sad to see it, but I'm not happy either. It's just somewhere in between.
Yeah, one thing actually, as an addendum to what you were saying there, Rich, if people don't understand the premise, because that might have sounded complicated, the part about like the ratio of the debt has to remain the same. So let me put it this way. Here's a way to explain it to someone as a thought exercise, right? The team buying in, so we're talking about Schalke, the org, obviously did not have a massive amount of money. I mean, despite the fact I'm pretty sure Riot was like chuffed, like, oh, I've got a fucking sports team. It's like, yeah, not a very good German sports team, you moron. You haven't got like PSG or something like you might actually spend, fucking tens of millions. So when they got this team, right, obviously they aren't a team that was trying to break the bank. They actually were one that, as far as I can tell, min-maxed most of the time. And by the way, did a fantastic job. Like if I was to tell anyone in the of LEC, bear in mind, to win, you have to just have all the money and be amazing. Like, they basically had to be amazing with fuck all money. I think they did a very good job if you look at how they performed over the years. If you look at even some of the players, by the way, tell you what, whoever actually was doing the real recruiting at Schalke has a fucking eye test. Look at some of the people they picked up. They picked up all the people that everyone now would go, well, everyone knows fucking Adu Amne and upset a grit. Well, you wouldn't believe how many people didn't want him. Like fucking Oduam had no way he could go. Upset, like everyone was saying the same shit back then. Yeah, he's good, but can he actually win a new team or whatever? Like fucking bozo sports takes. Like, so everyone now will say they're sick. These guys, they got these players into their team at perfect time relative to the value of the market and what they could pay. So here's what you got to think of: the team that buys their slot isn't buying their slot to say, "Cool, can I just pick up where you left off and be a shit tier team at the bottom and have to book?" Or if someone buys the spot, think of it like Rich says: say all the revenue increases, but all the ratios stay the same. Well, now I could potentially sell the slot for even more because the person buying in wants to do something with that spot. Like maybe they want to be the best team in the league. Maybe they want to like actually be a G2 competitor. So now they're not just buying it for the spot anymore. They're buying it for what they could do with it. So of course it could be worth way, way more. It might, like if they're going to spend, I'll make up a number here, like 5 million player role salary, all of a sudden they might pay 5 million extra to buy the slot. Like it's the opportunity cost almost you're adding up there. So I think that definitely is the case. I do think think that's the sad part for me. Like, I don't get that hype. Like, I said this on some Insight. It's not like they're a fucking legacy org, guys. People are acting like, fucking fanatics, like, leaving or something. No, like, difference is those orgs have incredible history that it will be really a blow for you. Like, as much as I meme on Fnatic being shit financially, it'd be very, very sad if they ever have to fucking shut that org down or just leave esports in games like League of Legends. It will actually ruin part of the history. But I will say, like I said, the thing I will miss with Schalke is I quite frankly don't trust most of the bottom feeder orgs, and especially no one new until I've seen it, to actually be able to like properly run a team like Schalke did. Like I said, for the amount of money that they were putting in and some of the like players, again, they also didn't have their pick of the litter, even if they had the money, by the way. Most people obviously wanted to go to other teams. So I have to say, I thought they did a fantastic job competitively. Like, I don't think you can really say they did much wrong in that regard, especially with all the roster moves. Again, they didn't even have a choice half the time. Like, they had that problem we used to have back in Counter-Strike when the scene was very small, which is if you're not the top org, what happens is, say you're like the third best Swedish Counter-Strike org, what happens is you find a player, great, you did an awesome job scouting, he's brilliant. Yeah, good luck. Next year he goes to like Fnatic or SK Gaming and now you lose him. And now guess what? Not only do they have your sick player you found, you now have to go find another guy who's the next one of them. And you know what? I think people can see where this is going. You can guess what happens when you find him. He goes to fucking Fnatic and then he's and eventually you're just like, do I ever get a chance? Well, the stupid thing about LEC is in theory you are supposed to. Like in theory it's supposed to mean like some of the parameters are the same, and beyond people like G2, spending mega bucks on people, if you're shrewd, especially with like the limited bottleneck from the RLs now, you should actually be able to get good players even on some of these lesser teams. So I think that's the biggest shame for me, because I don't know who this BDS, do you actually know anything about them, Rich? I know fuck all about this org, so I have no reason to be
It's a French org who kind of wanted to go in and basically spend a lot in France to do well in France. They didn't win their own region because another roster, the team that won EU Masters, right, was in their region. But I think they mean business, so to speak, as in they're not going to come in and try and min-max in terms of salaries versus income. Like, I think they will try and spend. I think they'll try to be more than just an also run. I don't find the brand inspiring. I don't find any of the sort of attached assets that I could look up to be even exist really. Like, I don't see them coming in as like a big name in the context of the league, right? They might have big investment behind them, but to me it's not an interesting brand. I think from like Riot's perspective, unfortunately for Schalke, I think Riot are probably fine with Schalke leaving, because in a weird way, I think Schalke kind of peaked in terms of what they could do for Riot, right? They were meant to be like an also run in terms of how they'd been managing the team, in terms of finances, in terms of not having like the biggest, flashiest players names, but managing to recruit, people that other people had overlooked or whatever. And then they go on like a couple of miracle runs. Like, that's perfect. That's like the most you can hope for, right? From one of those styles of teams. And in terms of the brand, I think early on, because the whole like football team thing kind of became a meme, but early on that was a bigger deal than it ultimately ended up being, right? You alluded to it would be very different, for example, if I don't know, a team like HGK had, hypothetically partnered with a team like PSG, that would probably have been a much bigger coup for Riot, because a brand like PSG, it's not just a football team, it's basically like a lifestyle brand. Like, they've done all these collaborations with like Jordan, and, they're global, they're going into Asia in a big way. Like, that would have been a much better long-term play for Riot than taking Schalke. I think they're kind of secretly happy that Schalke's probably leaving, because what can you really do with Schalke? It's the middle of the line sort of Bundesliga football team, which has a bunch of professional standards that you could probably fairly safely rely on, right? Like, they're very unlikely to get embroiled in like mass scandal or not paying players and stuff like that. So that's nice. They're like a nice safety net team. But realistically, if you're looking in the long term, I think Riot's probably not that disappointed to lose Schalke, which is obviously a shame. But I guess if I was them, I probably would feel similarly, but I also would have probably wanted PSG in my league. So there you go.
By the way, that's also why, in my opinion, we're going to see like a less of the sports overlap than people think we are from all these franchise leagues. Because as you say, there are certain football clubs, like this is, by the way, the reason why people wanted to do something like the Super League. These brands understand they aren't just football teams. They're not just there because they're the best. Like Real Madrid could not win the fucking like La Liga for the next 10 years and sell 1 billion jerseys every fucking season because it's Real Madrid, for fuck's sake. Like, there'll be some little kid in India right now wearing like an old fucking fucking Ronaldo jersey from like 5 years ago, won't they? Of course they will. You know, same as if you go to England. This is why I said, to me, the whole European Super League, where they were like, oh, it's a bloody disgrace. It's like half the cunts in fucking my hometown are wearing Messi jerseys for the last 15 years. They're not wearing fucking Harry Kane jerseys. So like that ship sailed. That's some boomer shit, thinking it's like, oh, the spirit of the game and that. So to me now, like the business side has overtaken football. But like as you'd expect, it's only a few teams. In the same way as you're not going to find many people with a jersey of an LCS team who aren't like a TSM fan, a Cloud9 fan. Like, there's a few orgs that stand above. Well, what I think people like Riot didn't get, Rich, is they didn't get that this applies for sports teams too. Like, they really thought, no joke, when they made Overwatch League. I can tell you this from talking to some of the top people. They thought one of the reasons it had to succeed is because they thought, right, well, this guy who's buying a slot, if for example, here's the example one, say it's Robert Kraft who also owns the fucking Patriots within the same region, well, he'll know everyone in the region, won't he? So he can get all the sponsorships he wants, he'll get like all these unique activation. Listen, it sounds great, but the point is, does he actually give a fuck about the Overwatch TT? Will he do any of those things? Is there even any crossover? Like, you actually, there's a lot of assumptions sort of baked into the pie that we haven't tested. In fact, we're sort of testing now, because I have to say, as you pointed out, like, there were much bigger fish could have been in LEC. I know people act now like, well, they had to take the first 10. They didn't. Like, dude, I know everyone's going to laugh now, but obviously the team in Counter-Strike North closed down, a Danish team, right? They were partnering with FC Copenhagen. That's a way bigger fucking sponsorship than Schalke. What? So, like, to me, like, there were bigger fish that could have been in LEC. And I actually think, by the way, now, so I want to get your take on before we move to the game-related stuff. I think it was a bit short-sighted, some of the people they let through the door, mate. Like, I could have told them even at that time, you are letting Astralis through and they're literally going to min-max this whole motherfucker. I even think with the way they min-max, like, basically, like, abusing personal relationship with players, I thought that was disgraceful, quite frankly. I think that's everything I wouldn't want in a franchise league, you know?
Yeah, I think they prioritized control over business. I think one of the reasons why they may or may not have rejected PSG from LEC was actually not because they didn't want brands the size of that, but because they didn't feel like they could control them, especially with who they were partnering with, right? They just felt like they couldn't realistically control them, or that they would be a threat, or would actually be able to exercise pressure to, you know, try and push for things like more financial viability on a year-to-year basis and stuff like this. They actually cherry-picked people or organizations who they felt couldn't exercise this amount of power, or couldn't ever seize any kind of element of control over the direction the league was going in. And I can tell you, like, from experience, and this was something that always really pissed me off, and I just found it absolutely pathetic, is I was in every single Riot owners meeting from January 2015, or maybe even the one before in 2014, I can't remember, all the way through to the last one in 2018. And at no point can I recall anyone from any other team other than Unicorns of Love ever voicing any kind of, hey, maybe we should do this, or don't you think it would be better for everyone if we did this? It was always just head nodding and placating whatever Riot wanted, and just desperate and sweating to get their foot in the door of franchising and not basically rustle any feathers, because they thought, you know, once they've done that, they can, you know, breathe a sigh of relief. And then maybe then at that point, if they feel like they can start fighting for some of the things they should have fought for from the beginning. So yeah, I think the franchising decision making was way more so about control than actually having good big business partners who could like elevate the scene, right?
True. By the way, that has generally been the MO of Riot that I've always pointed out, is they will always choose total control over more money. I mean, part of it's because they're a little fucking kid playing like in their own sandbox, aren't they? Like, they make as much money as they want off the game almost. Like, I will say, by the way, that's why, here's the real reason I don't give Riot almost any credit for the shit they've changed. Aside from the stuff that everyone told them changed 10 years ago, that made sense 10 years ago, and they finally changed it like 10 years too late. There's also the shit where they change it now, Rich, and they clearly were just told by Tencent, you must do that now. And then they pretend like it was their reason. So half the shit they brought in that we all like now is just because Tencent was like, actually, we also do want to make all the money. Like, listen, we're from China, mate. We do control and all the money. So, if anything, sort of met their own match there, right? Let's talk about some of the games then. Because I can already see Wicked just glazing over there. He's like, when does the business section? Is this the financial show? I thought I'm on the wrong show here. So let's talk about the game.
The thing is, I don't really know anything about that, right?
No, it's its own world, mate. It is. I just thought since I have Rich here, he'll be able to give him some insight, right?
Yeah, of course.
Want to see more cool, funny, interesting interesting clips based on topics from my content, well, subscribe to this channel then, or, you know, be a pleb and don't.